Alright guys, I'm back, and as you can tell by the thumbnail, I have now gigged with the Tonemaster Pro and the FR12 cabinet, both of them, of course, made by Fender. And before we get going, again, big shout out to my guys at Zzounds for making this happen. I really have enjoyed many shows so far, I think 5 in total, using just the Tonemaster Pro and nothing else besides my wah pedal, and that's it. So I've enjoyed several shows with the Tonemaster Pro, but I wanted to hear what the companion FRFR sounded like with the Tonemaster. And so this past weekend, I played a show with, again, it was just the Tonemaster volume pedal, my wah pedal, and the FR12 behind me. And I also used the Chapman ML1 Pro Modern for the show, as well as my Explorer for the show. And we all had a great time. I have played around with the FR12 using my FM3, as well as the aux box using a few of my amps, just to hear what it sounds like on its own without the Tonemaster feeding it. And I think that it's got a couple of interesting things going for it that not many FRFRs on the market have. So right out of the gates, one of the most obvious things going for it is it looks like a guitar amp. It looks like a Fender combo amp on stage. And if you're wanting to have the look of a stage musician with an amplifier behind you, this certainly is the way to go. The other big thing that it has, other than the kickback legs, which I think is a very handy addition if you're not wanting, the sound blasting at your feet and you want it kind of projecting up into the room, like I typically enjoy. The kickback legs are nice as well. But I think one really nice thing about this unit is that it has the volume, bass treble, middle, and a presence cut, a top end cut. All these controls along the top of the unit, so you're not having to reach back for those controls to mess with them, or just not having them at all. Like my ZLX monitor, it doesn't have any of that stuff. It's got a bass and treble, but as I said in my second gen ZLX review video, the frequencies on the low end and the high end that the built-in EQing provides, they don't really translate that well to a guitar signal, whereas this is much more squarely aimed at the frequencies that you would typically adjust on a guitar amplifier. And the other benefit of having physical controls is that, unlike the second generation ZLX, which I really liked, you don't have to have a Bluetooth app on your phone to make those adjustments. They're all right there, physical controls, easy, quick access. So when I originally pulled this thing out of the box and started playing around with it here in the studio, both with the Tonemaster Pro and the FM3, I wasn't really in love with the sound. And I think after playing a show with it, it's because I really wasn't utilizing the EQ controls on the unit itself the way that I believe now they should be used. I was trying to focus more on doing all of the tone shaping in the modelers themselves rather than on the FR12, kind of with the mentality that I've been using with the ZLX, where all the tone shaping happens on the device and then there's a final polish that goes through it on the FRFR, or in the case of my ZLX, if there is any final polish to be done, it's like that bass and treble control, which kind of really doesn't do anything. So with that ZLX, I'm more leaning heavily into the modeler itself to make sure that the sound is just right, and then making final tweaks in the PA with our mixer. But the ZLX behind me is just kind of whatever the modeler feeds it. And so when I got to the show, I did take the ZLX just in case things just weren't really vibing with me on stage, and messing around with it in soundcheck, I really started tweaking the controls more and more past that noon position, further away, both up and down. And that's when I feel like the thing really kind of came into its own on the stage, and it started to deliver a sound that I really was looking for when I had it here in the studio. In the studio, I was feeling like it had this like a stuffiness in the mid-range and the lower mids that didn't feel or sound natural to a guitar amp. And it wasn't until I really started to push the treble on this on the FR12, and also push the treble a little bit on the Tonemaster and pulled the mids in the EQ pedal block that I have after the amp in the unit. I pulled the mids down a little bit, and once I kind of got those mids under control and the top end pushing a little bit more, that's when I felt that it really started to come alive on the stage. And as a result, I had a great show. I wasn't having to sit there and think about it not sounding right, you know, coming through the in-ear monitors, which I use those ASI Audio IEMs, and they have the little microphones built into them so you can hear the room also. So I hear everything on the stage, including the FRFR or a speaker cabinet or whatever is behind me. And so if the sound coming from my FR is not really dialed in right, I can hear it in my ears, and it can bother me, and it can start to get in my head and, you know, screw with my concentration. And so I was going into the show worried that that's what was going to happen after my experience with it in the studio. But as I really started to play with it and tweak those controls a little bit more, it really started to, like I said, it started to deliver the sound that I didn't have to sit there and worry about. I could just focus on playing music and having a great time with the people in the crowd. Now, as far as the way that Fender has voiced this thing, again, compared to the ZLX and a couple of the QSC monitors that I've gigged with, this one is much more subdued in the top end. It's much more rolled off. It has a more pronounced mid-range and lower mid-range. And while there is a good amount of low end there, it's not going to kind of beat you over the head the way that the ZLX12 or our QSC K12.2, both of those are going to deliver substantially more low end and like unnaturally too much low end to where it starts to, you no longer sound like a guitar cabinet back there. It's an unnatural sound that you really have to be careful with. But on the FR12, even though, again, there is a good amount of thump coming from the unit itself, it's not something that you're having to sit there and really tweak around and, you know, be careful with. You can kind of just leave it there and it just sounds right. So I'm glad that they gave it kind of like the out-of-the-box voicing of not too much of that unnatural sparkle in the top end and not too much of the my hands, here they are on the camera. So not too much top end and not too much low end. Like, it's kind of like shaved off in just the right way so that it's a little bit more natural sounding as a guitar cabinet. However, that being said, you still know that it's an FRFR. You still know that there's a PA speaker behind you. It doesn't sound like a guitar cabinet. Again, like I said in my ZLX Generation 2 review, which does have an FRFR mode, and it does kind of make those tweaks to the top end and low end, you still know that there is a PA speaker on the stage behind you. There's really no getting around that. I've never heard a PA speaker sound like a guitar cabinet because that's not what they are. They don't deliver power and sound the way that a normal speaker cabinet does. But out of the box, the FR12 does a pretty great job at getting the kind of the general ballpark sound just right for you not to really have to focus on the fact that you do have a PA speaker behind you. All right, so how does this FR12 stack up against some of the competition on the market? Kind of these FRFRs that are designed to accommodate guitar players with modelers, impulse response loaders, and things like that. Well, I think it kind of sits in the middle of the pack. You know, you've got your more budget-focused products like the Headrush devices, and then you've got the 10-inch version of this, which I think is around $500, and then you've got this one, which is $100 more, and then you've got the Line 6 offerings, which are a little bit more expensive, but they also do some extra things like speaker cone modeling, where they can make it sound like a Greenback or a Vintage 30 or whatever. So you've got those things that are a little bit more expensive, but then you also have like the even more expensive stuff like the Friedman has a powered cabinet, and then at the very kind of upper crust, you've got the Mission Engineering Gemini stuff, which I think is fantastic after hearing one of those live. Very impressive, but the price tag is certainly reflective of that quality that I heard. So I think for the practical gigging musician who doesn't want to break the bank and wants something that's affordable, that sounds good, that has good options in terms of control of the unit, and looks really nice on stage, I think that Fender kind of hit the mark on everything that they needed to build a competitive FRFR for us guitar players. So in conclusion, I think that sort of circling back around to the premise of my reviews in terms of me taking them on stage to see what they can do, this is the perfect example of why I want to take things on the stage. Because if it was just me here in the studio, we wouldn't be having a very friendly conversation about this product, because taking it on stage is what forced me to really, mess with the EQ and push these controls in ways that at the house, my brain was telling me, you shouldn't need to do this. This thing doesn't sound the way that I want it to. Try to EQ it in the Tonemaster or my Fractal unit and see if you can get it sounding right there. And I just wasn't getting the results that I wanted. But when I took it on stage, I'm like, okay, I've got to figure this out, and just really started just kind of going haywire with the controls. And once I did, I was like, oh, well, that's how I was wanting it to sound. So taking it on stage and hearing what it could do, that's what made the product a win in my book. And, again, that's why I take these things on stage, because that's where you can really find out what these things are made of. This is made for performing musicians, and as a performing musician, it worked. And I'm really glad that I took it on stage, and I'm glad I asked the guys at Zzounds to send it to me to try out so that I could really kind of see what was this like compared to the other FRFRs that I've tried, and I enjoyed it. And the other thing on stage that I noticed that I didn't notice in the studio, mainly because the studio isn't nearly as big as, a big room that you're playing on, the sound spread coming from this thing is better than I was expecting it to be. The ZLX is fairly narrow in terms of, its spread. If I'm on, my side of the stage, everything's fine. But if I step over or like out into the crowd, which we typically do a few times every show, you can immediately lose the sound in the in-ears if I'm only relying, mainly on the room audio. Again, having the direct audio from the mixer, going into the in-ears, that certainly helps. But the change in the sound from hearing a blend of the actual FRFR behind me going through my ears along with the direct signal, and then stepping off the stage and losing the sound of the FRFR on stage and only hearing the direct sound, it was much more noticeable with the ZLX than it was with the Tonemaster, or excuse me, with the FR12. I believe that this has a bit more projection of the sound and a bit wider of a spread on stage. So again, that kind of more like a guitar cabinet spread would be. It wasn't as directional and beamy as either the QSC or the ZLX. So again, a couple more points for there. If you guys have a modeler or use an impulse response loader on stage, or you're wanting to go cabless but still have something that's fairly lightweight, much lighter than a 112 guitar cabinet, and have a really solid amount of power to be heard with a full band, you can check this thing out at Zzounds.com, and I will have an affiliate link to this unit as well as the Tonemaster Pro in the video description, along with anything else that I've used to make this video happen. And if you already do have a Tonemaster Pro, you can check out the user patches on the community page when you are in the software. I've got several of my patches uploaded using my screen name that I use here as the author. So if you search for my screen name, then you'll find the patches that I've created, including this Silver Jubilee patch, which is what I gigged with this weekend at our show. And, the Jubilee ribs, that's my baby, so it was really good. All right, guys, that is going to wrap up this review video, and I'm glad you hung out with me. And I've got the review of the Tonemaster Pro coming up here in a minute that I'm going to start recording right after this. So stay tuned for that as well, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.